So first of all, let me thank you, gentlemen, for your patience with us with the process. This is a trial error in doing the hybrid with the Zoom call, and some of the connections and technical difficulties were there, but we figured it out now. So thank you very, very much for your time. We're very, very grateful to have you here, pouring into our audience. And for everyone out there that is listening, feel free to absolutely, if you're connected via social media or if you're live in the Zoom, please drop your questions if you have questions. We're still interactive. We can still see you. My name is Maranda Joiner, and I am the CEO and co-founder of Succeed and Elevate, which is a nonprofit organization committed to helping small business owners overcome burnout. One of the main things that give people burnout is when things go left and there's failure. So shout out to this immaculate team behind me, from the Beam Path to Red Square, for quickly navigating that problem and only taking about 12 minutes to do so. That's actually a record. So I want to jump into this talk. We've delayed enough time. I want you gentlemen to, for the sake of time and brevity, I would love for you to introduce yourselves and tell us about the name of your company, and after that, the impact that you're hoping that your company makes in this space. But for those of you that are just joining us, I want to let you know today's Tech Talk panel is the discussion. We are talking around exploring how creativity, AI, and inclusivity intersect, and we're talking about the significance of diversity in ethical AI development. So that is our topic and focus today. Without further ado, gentlemen, can you please introduce yourself, and can we start with Mr. John?
Oh, thank you. Well, glad to be here, and glad we got those issues ironed out. John Pasmore. I am the founder of something called Latmimer.ai, which is a large language model trained with additional history and culture about African-American people, history and culture, Black and brown people. So that's kind of our focus, really, is limiting or mitigating the bias that some of the large language models have displayed when trying to be diverse or inclusive. So that's our reason to be. That's kind of the focus of our impact, is not only to make sure that African American history is accurate in this brave new world of artificial intelligence, but also encouraging young people to be creators in the space, to not just be kind of consumers of artificial intelligence. So we spent a lot of time working with HBCUs and look to spend a lot of time on campus with HBCUs this fall.
Beautiful. Thank you for that. Gentlemen, DeSean or Steve, either one.
Steve, go ahead.
Sure. I'm Steve Jones, one of the founders of Pockstock, POC Stock. We're a global platform that provides quality images of people of color for brands and agencies to use in advertising, marketing, and now artificial intelligence. We've been around about 4.5 years, and we're really trying to make sure people of color are included in everything that is movement, that is moving, because we move culture. And so we focus on having people of color in front of the lens, behind the lens, on our cap table, on our executive team. So our entire business model is built around uplifting, various cultural groups. And we're looking to make an impact in AI, because, as John said, this is the next big boom. And, in general, whenever these large booms happen throughout our civilization, people of color are not always at the forefront of it. So we're always at the table after the meal is eaten, looking to pick up crumbs. And AI gives us a unique opportunity to be at the forefront of it, because it's so new and it's so undiscovered. As beautiful and as exciting as it is, it's still in its nascent stage. So this is the version of AI that we have now, and people use that term and as a broad umbrella for machine learning, but it's so many opportunities for us to get involved. So based on what we know, and I'm a former technologist myself, there is opportunity for the next wave of AI products that hit the market to be heavily influenced by us as people of color. And you don't have to be a coder to take advantage of that. And I'm hoping we'll talk about a little bit more about that in terms of on-ramps into AI. So we're looking to create pathways for us into this next big boom, this thing that's going to change everyone's lives, our lives
Yeah.
included. So
Yes, I think it's already doing it. I agree. Like it's already revolutionizing the way we show up in workspaces and in creativity. Deshaun, with you guys having the same, you guys are a part of the same company. I would love to know. I know he probably said a lot of the stuff. He stole all of your thunder, and so. But what I would love to know is your title and what made you want to be a part of this company and organization. Why was it important for you to jump on board with this company?
DeSean Brown, co-founder, chief relationship officer at Pockstock. Well, it's important to me because representation has always been important to me. I think from a personal level. Similar to Steve, my background is technology, advertising, marketing, and production as well. And I think as we've built technology, advertising and marketing campaigns, we've done productions all over the world. We didn't necessarily see ourselves in the strategy and the data and the teams in front of behind the camera. So we're solutionists. So if we see a problem, we're going to create something that's going to, I think, not just advance technology. I think as a technologist, that's how I was taught is that you're going to create things that are going to advance the world. But I think as we've matured in our careers and our lives, we've seen that many of us, many people who are like us, who look like us, who come from places like us are often left behind. So I got a point in my career, and I think this is very similar to many people who work with Pockstock, is it was a calling to meet the moment in your life and your career to do something that gives back to our people specifically, but I think all people. That's what inclusion is, and being curious about, well, what is the impact of technology and how that's going to transform our lives. So that's my why with Pockstock, and I think we have a great opportunity to work directly with major advertisers, brands, and technology companies to get those seats at the table to help engineer strategy, to help engineer technology, to help engineer data.
I love that. I love how you said that we all will benefit from it, as in the inclusiveness of that. Because, I was talking to my 18-year-old son about just being exposed to other cultures, how refreshing that is for you. And when we think about people of color, usually how we're portrayed is always it's a misinformation about who we are at our core and what we believe. And so I love that there's that inclusiveness about how it can change us all to be exposed to that, to have more access. John, I want to ask you, we're going to get into the conversation of what are some areas in the industry where people of color can thrive and some of the misconceptions about positions in tech and what that looks like. But John, I would love to ask you before we go into that, when it comes to thinking about what it would be like to not have that, what are your thoughts about what would be the repercussions of a lack of diversity if we keep moving in this direction? What do you think will be the impact of that?
Well, I think we've seen little glimpses of that in terms of misrepresentation of the culture, or erasure of history. And now you have, certain states here in our country where governors are saying, what books can be in the library and what books can be taught in school. And I think we want to create a digital space that is kind of out of reach of those governors, because I think, we've progressed to a certain point where we want to have access to education. We don't want, some governor with different views to affect the education of our children. So I think, we want to be very active in terms of technology. And then even within the hiring of the, of companies, or in the case of like Steve and DeSean, creating something, because there's maybe a hole. You can look at maybe Getty, but does Getty really represent what the culture is, and do they have a barometer of what's what images would be representative of what we consider the culture? Probably not. And you kind of see that Google maybe 2 months ago released a whole product with images, and the images were all wrong. And it's like, you would think that, essentially Google has, more money than most countries, and more resources, certainly more engineering resources. So the fact that they could actually release a product like that to the public means that somebody's not paying attention, or in the product testing, they're not really testing against kind of the things that we think about, which is race, or how we're going to be portrayed, or, what happens when you type this in, what is it, what comes out of the machine. So we don't want that to happen in a larger scale effort. We certainly don't want to happen, fine, it's, kind of pretty pictures on the internet, but a lot of this technology is used in, criminal justice, or in policing, and in other areas where a mistake can, be very costly.
Lost lives, yeah, absolutely. And
Absolutely.
yeah, to piggyback on what John was saying, if you don't mind,
No, I was coming to you next, Steve. I knew it. I felt it.
I felt it. But no, there's a lot of harmful results that have happened, and John touched on something, and I can't really talk too badly about Google because they're one of our clients. But if you look at their hiring, like if you look at the percentage of diverse people in their hiring chain, especially as it relates to tech, right? Somebody in that room, if they had a really good diverse mix of people on the engineering team, on their data team, on their research team, somebody could have said, well, let me create a rubric to analyze this data and say, okay, where do we over-index in this category? Where are we under-indexing in this category? So there could be more balanced data. And one of the things that I've learned, and I'm not an artificial intelligence engineer myself. Like, we built a platform, but I was more of a strategist than a tech person, but I do understand enough to be dangerous. And one thing I realize is that AI doesn't know what's true and what's false. It really only knows it gives predictions based on what you feed it, right? And if you have data that skews in one direction over another, it's going to predict more in that direction. And I'm more, Pockstock is more in the visual space. So we deal with images. John is more in the text space at this time. So they're dealing with more the large language model. We're dealing with more images. And so things that show up for us on our radar is like a while ago, this young lady from MIT, put her Asian young student, put her image in one of the generative AI platforms and say, make me look more professional. And it stripped away all of her Asian features, made her lips thinner, made her skin lighter, change her hair texture, change her eye. It turned her into a facsimile of herself, but more of a Caucasian, presenting kind of person as what is professional. And it's not to say, and I sparked a debate on LinkedIn about it, but it is not that AI was racist, is that the data over-indexed in terms of the proportion of images of white people are more easily accessible for these data models than they are diverse imagery, right? So there isn't enough balance in the data in order to produce a result that we as people of color would say, okay, this is a good representation of us, from a quality standpoint. And a lot of these AI companies it's like a gold rush. They're rushing to market with products that are not really ready for commercial use as of yet, but they want to get their products out into the market as soon as possible. And it could be harmful. Like that. Yeah. That's just one example, but there's dozens of examples of AI getting it wrong as it relates to us, because for many decades, data about people of color was largely overlooked. It wasn't high value. Images of us weren't the high priority. So now there's a shortage of that data that you need in order to produce the quality results. So one way or another, AI is we're going to have to solve a lot of our racial challenges in order for AI to work properly.
Absolutely.
I agree. I think, honestly, we're talking about AI potentially impacting every aspect of our life. So you think about all the gaps that currently exist and thinking about those widening. So we currently have a culture gap in this country, which many times is often due to a gap in education and understanding. You think about a wealth gap. So I think to Steve's point, as humans, if we haven't reconciled these gaps we currently have society, and we're simply feeding our current lived experiences and data into AI, it's not at a point where it's going to fix it, it's potentially going to make it even more harmful. So it is very important. I think a point of this call is to, how do people get involved? How do we raise awareness to these things and get people to be early adopters? Because I think we know certain communities are typically late adopters. And for those folks, whoever they may be, wherever they may be in the world or in this country, I think technology has just, the speed of new technology entering the marketplace is way more rapid than when Steve and I used to code. So we can't afford to be lazy. We can't afford to be ignorant, because I think we could spend days talking about one specific way it could negatively impact. It's going to impact all of our lives.
Absolutely, absolutely. I love that. Oh, go ahead.
Think about what John just said in terms of some of the applications. That's just one or two. So imagine a future not too far from now, and I apologize for going on a tangent, but John sparked something here. He does that. Where AI is going to be used by doctors to help, figure out what's, going on inside of a patient. The healthcare system has failed Black women in general. So where's the data? Where's the accurate data that's going to come from, medical histories and things like that go into a model that says, here's how to properly diagnose a Black woman who's pregnant, so she doesn't, so she takes the baby to term, and there's proper prenatal care. Like, how do you get AI the data it needs in order to fix some of the issues, right? We know the criminal justice system is skewed towards over over incarceration of Black men, right? Or imbalance in terms of how different groups are, tried and sentenced, right? So that's the data that's going to be fed into AI. So AI is going to then take that and exacerbate those issues, right? So it has wide-reaching. AI is going to be in classrooms. It's going to be at the airport. It's going to be used for facial recognition. When it's going to be used by advertisers and marketers. They're just dying to get their hands on something that eliminates the human aspect of it. They want to type a prompt and have it spit out all of their work for them, right? But how is that going to work based on the data sets that we currently have? It's not.
Yeah, I think that's a very jarring point to bring up, that even in the medical space where we're using these technologies and then there's a lack of diversity there, how it impacts, at this point, it's life and death in some situations. And so I think that's really bringing the awareness to what the impact could be if we don't do something about it. And I also love how it was brought up that we have two powerhouses and change makers here addressing, two organizations that are addressing this from not only the imagery, but also the history in the back and the text part. And so I think that is something that's needed. We need more of that. I'm sure you guys could use more more organizations pushing towards that as we do that. John, I want to ask you, now that we've leveraged that, what do you think and because we're going to talk about imagery in a minute, because I know that, Pockstock is really adamant about not only creating images with people of color, but also adamant in bringing on creatives that are people of color. But John, before we get into exploring that with Pockstock, I want to ask you, what do you think are some of the underrepresented jobs, or not underrepresented, but maybe where there's a lack of diversity in the tech space when it comes to people of color? Because those are two different spaces, right? So one is where you pull from it, but then the other one is actually working in the field. In your experience, where can people of color connect to make a difference and be a part of this conversation and dialogue?
I mean, across the board in technology, there's kind of a persistent lack of diversity or lack of equality in terms of hiring across the major companies. So that kind of persists, but I don't think we can let that. We've lived with it for decades. So we don't want to let that kind of hold us back from some of the things that we should be paying attention to. And some of the new jobs are going to be, you know, certainly understanding technology to some degree, but a lot of it is enabling, a lot of this technology is enabling creatives to be even more creative. So you can, you know, you can use your voice to paint a picture, or you can use prompts to create a picture. So I think that we want to encourage young people to look at that, to say, hey, you know, in the future, you know, maybe you're not going to be working in a call center or some, you know, job that's going to be easily replaced by AI. So this gives you an opportunity to really use your creativity, whatever you were born with, and really kind of explore that. So whether it's music making, or whether it's creating images, or whether it could be creating technology. So, you know, now we have people that are called prompt engineers that can use text to tell a computer what code to write. So you don't necessarily need to figure out, hey, I need to learn Java, or I need to learn Python. You could just say, hey, I want to write this piece of code in Python, and this is what I want it to do. And it's an iterative thing. It's not like it's going to spit out the perfect code the first time. So you do have to understand, you know, what environment is this for? A phone? Is it for a laptop? Is it for a television? Is it for an automobile? So you're going to have to give the AI quite a bit of information about, you know, where this code will sit and what you want it to do and what other dependencies it has. So you have this, you know, what was almost maybe a supervisory role. You know, had a supervisor that kind of oversaw actual coders to say, hey, you're going to write this piece of this program, and you guys over here are going to write this. Now you're that person, and your assistant is AI technology. So, you know, I think that we really, you know, for what we're doing and what we're trying to do on campuses of HBCUs is really encourage people to use their imagination and to figure out, you know, do I want to be a technologist? Well, this is what a technologist is going to look like in 5 or 10 years from now. So think about that.
Yeah, I love it. Steve, what about you? What has been your experience in the tech space as a person of color, and where do you feel like people should lean into and experience?
I agree with John, and I think that, and I'm going to agree with John a lot, but uh, I think that the bar with AI becoming more accurate, like some of the early models were like 20-30% accurate, but they're getting, like, I've seen 80-90% for like some of the chat GPT models, right? So if you can imagine, you take what John just said about code and apply that to almost anything else, right? So like if you're a marketer and you want a campaign to be written, like you can go to one of these AI platforms and say, generate, you know, 500 words about this topic. And then you take that and you say, generate some images of these things. And then you say, put these things together and create this in for all formats of social media. So the bar for things that you had to do manually has just been lowered. So people who may have great ideas but don't have the technical proficiency to sit at Photoshop, to sit at and write blogs, now you can get your vision out there a little bit more. Now, it's not going to be perfect, right? So sometimes, like, you know, we've used Chat GPT to write a press release for us, and then we'll take it, you know, it'll take us 40% away there, and then we'll add our own tone of voice, and then, you know, take it from there. But it gives us a good starting point. So if you wanted to write a script, you know, at some point lawyers are going to be writing contracts with AI and analyzing, you know, all of these applications open up so many doors for people with different skill levels and different, you know, different interests. All right. So, and it's not perfect yet, you know, like John said, it's not perfect yet, but it can give you a good starting point. And if, as a creative, it would be great for me at some point to say, here's my idea, show me 10 variations of this, right? Or show me how this would play in a certain marketplace versus, you know, how would this look if this were a West Coast young Black male between the ages of 19 and 25 versus someone from the East Coast, and, you know, change the attributes. Like it would be interesting to see how that plays out, you know, and you know, anyone can do it. Like a lot of these platforms are looking for data and they're looking for inputs, they're looking for feedback, so they're free, right? Because in exchange for being free, you're now helping them to, get their model more accurate, right? So they're collecting data from you in exchange for providing this free service. So I would say take advantage of it, you know, play with all the platforms, see which ones can help be more productivity tools. In the best case scenario for me, I think AI should be an assistant, not a replacement
Yeah.
for human intelligence. But it could be a productivity tool. Anything that would take you 20 hours to do, that's a good way to use AI. Anything that would take 10 people to do, and you can, like that's a space where you can leverage AI to sort of magnify what a human being could do,
Absolutely.
but not replace it.
Absolutely, I agree. Steve, when you were talking, I was thinking about the time I was when the commoners, the regular people, when we finally got access to Chat GPT, because I know that wasn't the first time it hit the world. When we finally got access to it, and all the rooms were opening up about it on Clubhouse. I remember being in a Clubhouse room with a young lady, and she goes, and I was so unfamiliar with it. I had been ignoring the room because I was like, "What is this?" And I jumped in a room, and one of the ladies said, when she saw me, she was familiar with me and my content, and she goes, "Yeah, I know Miranda's already using ChatGPT." And I thought, oh, that feels like a compliment. But also, I am not a robot. These are my real words. I am a creative and a writer, so words are important to me. But I agree. I absolutely use the AI system as an assistant. You're absolutely right. And now that I'm familiar with it, what I do exactly what you said. I look at ChatGPT as the assistant that I've always wanted, and also the assistant that does not care about my scattered brain ramble. So it is a beautiful space that you can use when you learn how to leverage it. DeSean, I want to ask you, you all at Pockstock are very intentional about how you hire and bring on people of color to create content around the work that you all do. Can you tell me why that was so important for you all, and what are the benefits? What have you guys seen as the benefits of that taking place in the company?
I think we often look at Pockstock and try to model it after what we felt would have been effective for us, would have been effective for the teams that we work for, the technology and campaigns that we built. So it really was about having inclusion and equity, meaning different lived experiences, different voices, different perspectives, different insights at the table. And I think we've created something that does really entail a creative process and partnership. Steve can attest to this because after we deliver great custom work, he gets the final feedback from our partners, and they say that was the most collaborative, inclusive, diverse exercise we've ever gone through. Um, and it's really a learning exercise. So, in addition to getting content and data from us, you learn from us. You learn how to be inclusive from strategy through the final curating of assets and data to getting those into some platform and distributing it to a wider audience. So, I think for us, it's really about how could we remake the creative and production process to be inclusive, how that can more so engineer strategy to be really something that it was intended to really land with audiences in a true authentic way. And the only way that you're really going to be able to do that is to pressure test it. We pressure test everything in the production process. We do not take any brief, any strategy, any data point, any insight. We don't take it for granted. Oftentimes, our partners are lacking in bench strength in terms of they're looking to communicate to an audience, but they don't necessarily have those people in their room. So we're able to bring those people, those audiences, those insights into the room to really add that strong perspective. Um, and I think I would just say, from my perspective, I've learned so much. Um, and building Pockstock was an exercise in just being curious, more curious about the world. So I can't just speak about Black men in America. I had to become a global citizen and be curious about people and cultures outside of my culture. Um, we've gone beyond people of color and talked about what does true representation look like. So think about persons who are differently able. Think about LGBTQ. We have HR conversations every single day about, hey, should we say that? Is that a thing? Should we say? Because society changes. So for us, when we say we're curious learners, we have to literally assess culture and society every day to see how it evolves and how can we take those learnings and place them real time into the work that we do.
Yeah, very good. I
Right.
appreciate that. Yeah. Oh, I'm sorry.
And
Go ahead.
and I think what helps us to be able to do that is having a multitude of perspectives, backgrounds, and experiences to ask the right questions, to bring the right inputs and experience and history to the table.
Yeah, absolutely. I agree. And you're absolutely right. It changes just as constant as tech changes, just as constant as anything changes, what is politically and socially correct. And it also changes by region, where you are in the country, in the world. So it's very interesting. It's not easy to navigate. I think we don't give ourselves enough grace in that it's a lot to obtain. Because Steve got me all the way together in the email about not saying minority and people of color. And I was like, thank you, brother, because now I know when I travel outside of Mississippi, I need to say people of color, but that's the truth, right? So where you are, people use terms, and then when you go, what's acceptable in other spaces, it shifts. John, I want to ask you a question about your organization and your company. I would love for you to tell us a little bit about how you came about the name of your organization, and then also for you, how people can connect to the work that you do to help push that along. So I would love 2 parts there. Tell us really briefly about how you came about that name, and then how can people connect to what you do to help push the work that you do along.
How we came about the name. You know, the company's pretty young. We started the company last July, and we launched, we actually, stood up Latmimer January 22nd of this year. So it's a pretty young company. I had the idea, I think, last winter, just basically as I was kind of watching ChatGPT unfold, and then I saw people, what I would consider kind of complaining about the errors that it was making. And I was just sitting there saying, I know at some point somebody's going to just have, a home run solution that fixes these errors, because a lot of people are posting them. And when nobody came up with a solution, I contacted some folks, some friends, and said, let's just see if we can fix some of this. And what the other thing that we wanted to do, I think, with the name is kind of address that with Black and brown people, I think we're often looking, in terms of who we look up to or who are our heroes. And this is maybe more relevant today, given everything that's going on in the music industry, that, we look at artists, musicians, sports professionals as kind of our heroes. And, it affects, I think, sometimes the journey of young people, because they're like, hey, I want to be like Mike, right? And so I'm going to spend, 5 hours going to school and 5 hours playing basketball. And, maybe that's not the best thing for everyone. It's certainly, if you have the talent, go ahead. But, we want to say, look, there's all of these folks like a Lewis Latmimer, who is a genius, who maybe doesn't get the light that he should, but there's thousands and thousands of really, really special Black and brown people. Because of the country maybe we live in, we don't really understand, and we don't really hear their stories enough. So we wanted to kind of always have that out front, that there are Black and brown geniuses who, and there's, tens of thousands of similar people in the United States, and they should pursue their genius, whether that's math or computers or art, and just essentially with their head, as opposed to, your physical talents. So that's how we came up with the name. Like, let's just, the sports guys and the music guys are getting enough light. Let's focus on some people that kind of use their head, and made a name for themselves. And, I think that's just our focus kind of going forward. And, the reason why we spend a lot of time, talking with HBCUs, going to HBCUs, we think there's a lot of talent there. And we want to give them some resources. They certainly not, they have great resources and great instructors, but, we want to be the AI that they use. And, Miles College and Morgan State and many others are adopting that. And we have a we have a fairly big announcement coming up, knocking on wood, with the United Negro College Fund, because we really we want everybody, you know, we've built it, it's ready, so we want people to use it. And how you can give me feedback, you know, we take it through the application. If you sign up for the application right now, you get hundreds of free queries a month. But certainly I'm on LinkedIn, I'm on social media. You know, we're not so big that you know, I can't talk directly to somebody, so I'm happy to be available for that.
Yeah, do you mind voicing to me, what I heard you say was that you named your organization after a genius that should be highlighted and lifted up. Do you mind speaking really briefly to what he should be known for and more, you know, basically what was his mark in this world?
Well, Louis Latimer worked with both Thomas Edison and Alexander Graham Bell. And when you look at some of his work, we don't have all of his diaries, but it seemed like maybe some of the work that Thomas Edison, you know, took credit for, or, you know, certainly, you know, Thomas Edison was famous for commercializing. Hey, you went to work, just like if you went to work for AT&T Labs, you invented something, well, really AT&T kind of owns that thing. So you went to work for Thomas Edison. Hey, this is how we should make the light bulb, the incandescent, you know, part of the light bulb. Okay, great. Hey, that works. I'm Thomas Edison. I'm going to be, you know, what would be a billionaire today. You know, super wealthy. So, but those are the things that Louis Latimer created for people like Thomas Edison and for Alexander Graham Bell, who created the telephone. You know, very, very important things that, because of our history and because of the way people of color are treated in history, we don't have the full story of what their contributions were. We do see that it was a genius by all measures, and probably created a lot of the things that some of these other people have taken advantage of or taking credit for.
Absolutely. Thank you, John. Steve, did something John say spark a thought for you? Before I ask, I have a question for you, but I also want to give you room in case something he said sparked a thought, because that's how life works. Somebody says something and you think, and.
Yeah, no. I think John's thought was complete. I don't have anything to add to it.
Good. So I have a question for you then, Steve, in that case. When you think about the creatives being a part of the AI movement and being more invested in being a part of this process, what would you tell someone who is asking you, what do I do? Like, what would be my next steps? What would you advise me to do, like literally, not just in a overall arching way? What should I do? Should I find people in my community to connect to that are in the technology space? Should I go online and get training? What would be your suggested pathway?
That's a good question. It depends on the person and what kind of creative they are and where they are in their creative journey and what they normally do. Like if you're like looking to get into creative for the very first time, that's a different path than if you're working in an ad agency doing creative and you're looking for productivity tools. But I honestly would say everything is online. Like I would just do research on, you know, top AI tools. You know, there's all sorts of, this topic is everywhere. You can throw a rock in every direction and hit someone talking about AI. Everywhere I go, you know, every talk every place I'm speaking at, or AI is always in the conversation. I would say, you know, tune into some of the big players, the chat GPTs, and see what they're doing, and obviously follow Latimer and see what they're doing. And just go online, play around with some of the tools so you can, you know, hearing AI over and over, it's this term, it's just words until you actually try it out. So I would go to everywhere where there's a free demo or free prompts that you can do, and just try it and see what the results are, and just be curious about, okay, I did this and this happened. What else can I do? What else can I do? Because that's what everyone else is doing. No, there are literally not many AI experts, right? So we're all figuring it out, and you know, we're knowledgeable and we're curious and we're tinkering. But for the most part, you know, AI kind of, you know, at least on the consumer side, creates a playing field where almost anyone can get involved. You just have to be curious enough to do it and not intimidated by the big terms that people use when they describe it, right? So, you know, if you could do a Google search, you could do a prompt It won't be a great prompt, and it may not start off with produce the results at first, but you say, okay, give me, I need an essay on Thomas Edison. And then you realize, okay, I need to tell it how many words I need. I need to tell it what perspective it's coming from. Okay, I'm a college student writing an essay on Thomas Edison. I need 500 words about his life as a child. Like, then you start to say, okay, how can I tailor these prompts to produce the results that I need, right? So that is literally something that anyone can do. You know, people will do it differently, and you won't rise to the level of a prompt engineer right away, but that prompt engineer job is going to replace and functionally replace a lot of the way that we interact with creative today. On the other side of it, one of the things that we do, if you're a photographer or videographer, we're always curating content, and then the gaps that we spoke about in the data sets for a lot of these large providers, we're providing them with the diversity data to fill those gaps. So if you're a photographer or videographer of color or not of color, as long as you have people of color and you follow certain legal rules that we set as Pockstock, industry standard rules, there's revenue in using the images that are sitting on your hard drive, sitting on your USB drives, and we can help you monetize that. So these AI platforms require millions and millions of pieces of data in order to learn and become more proficient at producing predictions and results. So if you're someone who loves to take pictures or love to capture content, there's a space for you on that side of it as well, on the data, because those images are technically data, right? And as far as a generative AI platform is concerned. So there's a lot of on-ramps. So I am also accessible on social media. Happy to have a conversation and point people in the right direction, but it's more tailored towards where you are in your journey. And and I'm open to it. I'm busy with everyone else, but not too busy where I can't point someone in the right direction or answer a question.
Yeah, that's beautiful. That's a great response. It gives you the perspective of multiple ways. There are so many ways, like you said, but that was a great lead into what you can start to do, because most people, they get really frozen up with nothing, and they do nothing. They're like, it feels overwhelming. And most of the time when people feel slightly overwhelmed, when we think about the generations now, they just stop and then they mindlessly scroll. So thank you for that. Permission to just do the bare minimum and just search and get into it, and then start to do your research. I want to ask a question to make sure to my team. Are there any questions online that might have popped up before I move on to my question as we start to wrap up this conversation? Okay. All right, beautiful. So anyone can answer this question. We talked about like you said, from the consumer space, Steve, you just recently mentioned, thinking about the investment side, talking to people who want to invest. I know, John, you speak a lot about this in some interviews that I've listened to you do, but how can we move from being in the consumer space to investing in AI? Because there's both sides, right? So there may be some people that are thinking, yo, I don't know how to create nothing. And so what I do want to do, though, is how can I invest and be a part of this? What does that look like for someone who's interested in that?
Wow. So being an entrepreneur is kind of investing in yourself, which is, I think, what I'd recommend highly. Of course, you can invest with somebody like Steve and Sean. There are viable companies out there. They're hard to find. So, I think that, that's kind of a longer conversation because professional investing, where you're successful is quite a challenge. Certainly, there are folks in your circle, there are communities in basically every city that support investors. There are meetups for AI. So I'd recommend, if that's your goal, is that you want to be an investor, I would look at those. But most of all, I think what we support is people investing in themselves or for people that they know. One of the biggest hurdle for Black and brown companies is, when we look at this kind of arc of, hey, first you get friends and family to invest, and then you do an angel round, and then you do Series A, B, and then you're Google. Well, the issue is the friends and family. So, if you grew up in, Park Avenue in New York, and you talk to your friends and family, well, they're all pretty wealthy, so that, they can afford $10,000 or $50,000 to kind of, hey, if I lose it, fine, I'll get, my nephew kind of started in his career. But, for a lot of Black and brown people, getting that first friends and family round is super duper difficult, because we don't have a lot of people that can just say, hey, if I lose, $50,000, no big deal, I'll just keep it moving. So, that's, to the degree that you can support young people with great ideas and maybe some advice or maybe some actual, learnings of, if you're an older person, about what you've learned about business, that's valuable as well.
Yeah. When you hear the term ownership, and anyone again can speak to this, is that along the same lines when you think about investing and having ownership in this space? Is that the same, or would those two be separate?
It's similar. It's adjacent. So ownership the word ownership is different. So having some level of equity in the space is great, but we're talking about being a consumer or being a producer, and in general, but we're always the consumers of everyone's products and services. And I think we have an opportunity to also be on the supply side and not just on the demand side. And when it comes to investment, I agree with John. It was, we've raised several rounds of funding for Pockstock, and the friends and family round is always the toughest because our proximity to wealth has not historically been the same as other cultural groups. But there are on-ramps for, first-time investors. So there are platforms looking to crowdfunding. There are platforms that will allow you to invest as low as $100 into an idea that you like. Now, $100 is not going to bring back a huge return, but you can invest 100 one week, 100 another week, and kind of find some of those early stage startups that are raising capital in a non-traditional way, because we may not be able to tap our neighbor, like John said, and say, hey, I have this great idea, I need, or our parents or our colleagues, and say, hey, I need 300,000. All of the self-made millionaires of like the Amazons and the Teslas, they all got startup capital from friends and family in the hundreds of thousands, if not millions. There are no self-made millionaires in that way, in that group. So they all need capital to get started. So it's a good way, I saw a stat that says that generative AI is going to add about $4 to $7 trillion in GDP over the next, 10, 20 years. So someone's going to be making a fortune. We're going to have our first trillionaires as a result of AI, right? And who do you want to share in that wealth? I want us to, like we're on track to be net zero wealth in the next 20 years as Black people in this country, and it's just, this could be our way to turn that trajectory and generate some wealth for ourselves and our future generations of people, so we can have a fair playing field. But yeah, I would say, if you have $100, go to a crowdfunding platform. Some of them are like WeFunder, Start Engine, Republic. Find some ideas that you like and start investing.
Yeah, no, that's great. That's a great perspective. Go ahead, DeSean.
I was going to say something that John mentioned earlier about the learning part of this and meetups, whether they be in person or online. I think it's important to the conversation about what we may be limited in terms of friends and family, where we are not limited in terms of expanding our social network. So as you engage in this learning exercise and you go to enter new or different peer groups, those folks may have access to the resources and wealth that may one day help you on that path to be an owner or investor. Steve and I have known each other a lot of years, so we've had this conversation about, can you call your cousin? Can I call my cousin? But ultimately, we look to the broader networks, social networks, professional networks that we have built over. We're not going to say how old we are, but over the course of years. And there's so many different ways that folks can provide information, mentorship, support, capital that is going to help you again get away from being strictly a consumer to being a creator, to being an owner, to being an investor.
Yeah, DeSean, I feel like you were reading my notes because I was absolutely coming to you next to ask you a question in that same vein about mentorship. It's like we're all connected here. I think AI is tapped into our brains. So my question to you specifically is about mentorship. Can you speak about the importance of it? And then also, what advice would you give to someone seeking mentorship to lean and get into this space?
The first thing I would say is be direct and be bold about seeking mentorship. I think often we'll assume that people are too busy to lead us, guide us in mentorship. And I think for the most part, that's actually not true, especially people that we know. I often come across people who I needed to ask them a piece of advice or a favor, and I know this person works 20 hours a day, but I will find the time at some point to connect with you and help you along your way. So folks are very busy, and resources can tend to be scarce. But I think the first thing is to seek counsel, to ask for mentorship. Um, it's we. I'm on this call with two very intelligent gentlemen, but I think they can attest to there's only so much one person can know. I know many things that I've learned across my personal and professional career have been through the direct mentorship and guidance from someone. I can recall conversations that I had 20 years ago, even before I met Steve, of things that have actually come to fruition later on in life and actually helped me make certain decisions, such as when and how to engage in a venture like Pockstock, how to be ready for that, the good times and the bad times. I'm a semi-smart person, but collectively with my peers are a great source of knowledge, but also those folks who have mentored me have helped me figure things out, have helped me attack and address blind spots. We participated in a mentorship last year, the BLAC, not for profit, to place Black creatives in the advertising and marketing agency space. And I'm excited for the future because these folks are multidisciplined, multivariate, they're curious, and they seek and crave mentorship, and they are unapologetic about wanting to know things and asking for them. And I think that boldness is something that I admire. It's something that I try to bring to my job in the Pockstock every day. And I just think for our community at large, I don't think there's any reason for us to be bashful anymore. Let's be bold. But uh, as always, we've survived and thrived off of community. So part of that is seeking mentorship, but also being a mentor yourself. And I think Steve can attest to part of creating Pockstock was an opportunity for us to have a platform that can entail mentorship.
Yeah, I love that. John, did you have something you wanted to say towards that? Or
Yeah, I just wanted to say, for anybody that's listening, that to a large extent, a lot of what you're going to have to do is probably outside of your comfort zone. So when DeSean says be bold, so even if once you create a product, somebody has to sell it, and you're going to sell it to people who you've never met, and you have to find them and convince them to buy your thing. So, or the same goes with investors. If you feel like you want to go out and raise money, you're going to be talking to people that maybe just met you, don't know you, but you're going to be talking to them about giving you money essentially. And sometimes we have this kind of notion or this predisposition that, hey, the general market or white people aren't going to support this. And but I had that idea because essentially we're creating, like, people don't call it this anymore, but people call it the Black GPT. So if you're talking to if I'm talking to a white person and I say, well, some people call us a Black GPT, a quite common question would be, well, why would you even need that? So you're starting from a point where people don't really understand your culture. Maybe they see some Black people, but again, many investors, if you walk into a lot of VCs here in New York City, I was just in one the other day, and, there's, maybe 1% of the people that they work with, that they rub elbows with on a day-to-day basis are Black and brown. So they don't have a barometer. They see stuff on TV. They don't really understand. So you're going to have to get out of your comfort zone. And not to say that they won't be helpful, and not to say that, hey, if you have a great idea, and again, as DeSean said, people appreciate that kind of like bold move, because they know that that's kind of an entrepreneurial quality that you'll need over and over again. So you kind of want to see it show up pretty early.
Oh, that's so helpful. That's a very helpful on both ends insight to just be bold, because that is making that first step. People are in their heads and there's a lot of doubt, and it really shapes the way that they move throughout the spaces. Steve, I want to come to you as we wrap up. The final question I had before we talk about ways to connect to you gentlemen and stay connected to not only your organizations but you personally. Are there any final thoughts that you have? I want each, if for each of you gentlemen, like what would be the final thoughts that you would want to leave this panel with this audience after this very fruitful conversation around the space of creativity, AI, and diversity?
Yeah, no, absolutely. Well, first, thanks for having us on this conversation. I enjoy speaking with you all, and I love looking at the screen and seeing the melanated faces having such a conversation. This is not the everyday, but I love it. But I would just say, we're in the middle of a moment, a transformational moment, and it's not lost on me that these moments don't come that often. Like, we came here, Civil War, Reconstruction, that, and now we're in another really big moment. And DeSean said the word bold. I love it, because that's what we have to be. Don't be afraid to show up as yourself. Don't be afraid to go into those spaces. If you're looking for a mentor, don't just look for someone who looks like you. Look for someone who can fill in the gaps that each of us has in knowledge and experience, and go into spaces that make you uncomfortable, because those are the spaces where you're growing, right? If you're comfortable, then you're not challenging yourself enough to hit those growth points. And right now it's a very unique moment. So just take one step forward. Don't be afraid to go into chat GPT and poke around. It's perfectly safe. I know all the movies say AI is gonna launch missiles and all that. We're not there yet. But just use it, use this moment as a way for us to change our trajectory that we've been on for the past X amount of years. I would love to see us win as a people, and all of humanity come together. And I think this is a moment where we can take a step towards that. All people.
Yeah.
So that's really what I want to say. Lastly, Steve the Idea Guy on all platforms. Well, connect with me. I'm heavily on LinkedIn. Please, I'd love to hear from you.
Absolutely, Steve. Such a eye-opening perspective. A lot of your comments have been so eye-opening in that perspective. DeSean, what about you? What are your final thoughts, and where can people follow you?
You can follow me on social media, DeSean Brown, Pockstock. I would say I agree with Steve and John. This is a moment. We've had several revolutions as a species. Agricultural revolution, industrial revolution, technology revolution, data revolution. And I look back on those and how where we were as a people throughout each of those iterations and advancement of the species. And I think about people like my father grew up in the segregated South, and he reminds me every so often that people fought and at times died for you to have the access to spaces that you have. Um, he said, I'm not going to tell you how to feel about that, but I think it's something that you should know and you should always remind yourself of. So as we, Pockstock, created spaces for people, inclusion, to have representation in media and technology. I just think for all of us, it's really important to the best of our capabilities and also stepping outside of those comfort zones to get involved in this revolution because it's happening one way or another, with or without us. And I agree with Steve. I want it to be with us, and I want us at some point to be leading it.
Yeah, no, thank you. Thank you, DeSean, for that gentle reminder to remind my 19-year-old son the sacrifices that were made for him to do more than sit in his room on his phone and video games. So thank you for that. What about you, John? What are your final thoughts, and where can people connect with you outside of this?
Yeah, like Steve, I spend an inordinate amount of time on LinkedIn. I think if you're a business person, it's a great, it's still a great place to meet people. Again, a lot of what we do is meeting people that we don't know. And LinkedIn allows you to do that, to just try and connect. And then it's up to your own ingenuity or creativity or persuasiveness to send somebody, a connection request that inspires them to see what you're talking about. And I think it's just that. You gotta. We're taking chances. We're not saying that it's not twice as hard, being a Black or brown founder, but that's just is kind of what it is, and you can overcome that, but you have to kind of jump in and get started. So hopefully by this time next year, it's not just John and Steve. There's a whole group of folks that are out there doing stuff, and there is a group of folks already. I'm not implying that, because there's some great young companies out there, and we just hope that there's more. So I think the more smart folks that are doing stuff like this, the easier it is when somebody knocks on the door of some general market VC who's just seen 3 smart Black and brown people. So you're not the first anymore.
Yeah, no, that's beautiful. Beautiful, absolutely. You're not the first anymore, which are my favorite words to hear about us as people of color on this earth. I hope I'm still around for the day that I hear that more than this is the first person of color to do this, that I hear you're not the first anymore. So thank you for that. Thank you for this very rich conversation. You gentlemen are brilliant. And on behalf of BeamPath, Dr. Nashley Cephas, I just want to thank you for your time, not only your time, but your knowledge and your expertise pouring into this community and into the world for the work that you do. It is valuable and important. So thank you for sharing this space and helping us to understand what that's like to walk through that in this space. This is the kickoff. I want to remind everyone that's listening that, of course, May is Tech Month. If you didn't know, you should know. This is the Creative AI Week, the 4th week of AI Month, and it's highlighting the programs that are happening here at the BeamPath. This is the start of that, this particular panel. And so you can come in and get hands-on workshops right here in Jackson, Mississippi at the Makerspace. It's the BeamPath Makerspace. If you're not familiar with it, look them up on social media, but definitely stay connected. They have open labs, talks covering AI-generated art, how to use AI to help operate and create businesses, and of course, AI agency consultations. You can go to thebeampath.org to get more information, and you can click on AI Month. Earlier when I first got here, over here, they have the 3D printers that are actually actively moving as I'm talking to you all. And we were having a conversation about one of the young ladies. She said her daughter just graduated and got all this stuff, and she was like, "Mom, I want a Stanley Cup." And I was like, and so we started having this dialogue behind one of the gentlemen that works here about the ridiculous price of the Stanley Cup and all this. And he turns around and says, "Well, we have a 3D printer that can just print her up a Stanley Cup, and you can hand it to her and give it to her." So there's the beauty of what AI can do. So stay connected to the BeamPath. Thank you, gentlemen, for your time and space. Until the next Tech Talk, or until we see you again right here at the Makerspace, thank you all. And you have an amazing evening wherever you are in the world.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, John, DeSean, and Steve. We appreciate you. So nice to meet you, gentlemen.
Thanks.
All right. Absolutely.